Though he may not know what this means for his life, nor what the word even means, Spongebob is a walking oxymoron. He's a cartoon blessed with immortality, and cursed to never grow up. He's a teacher's pet who absorbs everything, yet only repeats what's on the surface. And if I squish him into one contradiction, he's a sea sponge who needs others to keep him anchored to the seafloor. Spongebob doesn't want that. He wants to grow up. To grow up, he needs to learn to drive, and to get his driver's license, he should probably know how to anchor his boat. Sadly, he's the kind of guy to drop an anchor at any sign of stress, which, like parking a car, is something you don't really do at a stoplight. Yeah, when you get to a stoplight, you stop or not depending on the color, but you sort of need to see the color's message and be able to respond to it to respond. And SpongeBob's anchored his boat off the side of the road to daydream about what he will and won't do when he finally gets to a stoplight. But little does he know, the essay and his life are not about a stoplight.
It's not about the bunny.
SpongeBob is a character of extremes, but whether he's more oxy or more moron isn't the point. The point is how SpongeBob responds to an obstacle, and not knowing what to do, he overthinks Mrs. Puff's words to the point his backseat driver just wants to show him imaginary stoplight after imaginary stoplight.
Okay, Gary, no goofing off. I am about to write the greatest essay of all time. Like most great essays, it will be written on paper. Even more important than the paper is the pencil. A pencil is sharp or as dull as I like. Funny. As my ideas grow, you shrink.
SpongeBob's ideas are like reading the fuel gauge after putting the key in the ignition, but never turning the key.
Okay, here we go. What not to do at a stoplight? Hey, this is easy. By SpongeBob Squarepants. Ha! This essay is pure gold.
And with that, he's already squeezed out whatever his spongy body could remember. But just like he relies on others to inform his behavior, he expects the pencil to write the essay for him.
And now, pencil, get ready to do your stuff, because here we go. Gee, this is harder than I thought.
SpongeBob anchored himself to a physical object, but making the pencil an extension of the self doesn't mean it will do all the work for him. Your essay won't magically appear if you write your name, just like having your name on a driver's license won't make your car autonomous. Is not unlike a college student who wanted to be a film major, but got a business degree instead, ready to go for a lucrative career and then hitting a wall upon graduation.
Oh, yeah.
In any case, the window was a lens to an idealized future. SpongeBob fills his hypothetical future with everything he misses out on in the present, ignoring that a future is just the natural outcome of one moment leading to the next.
Come on, SpongeBob!
It should be against the law to have to write an essay on such a super sailorific sunshiny day.
With that said, if SpongeBob can minimize the essay from a deciding factor for his future to a mere obstacle to short-term reward, he'll simplify what holds him back to willpower. That won't change how SpongeBob feels about his long-term anxiety, and it wouldn't even help, since reducing a task to willpower doesn't change a task's innate difficulty. This is especially so for a creature that doesn't move, and instead filters the environment through itself with a current of water. Literally, to get SpongeBob thinking, he needs something external to move through him.
I know. I just need to get a little blood pumping in the old noodle. How about some calisthenics?
All he's moving is the water through his body, but the effect is akin to when a more complex organism releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter that signals rewarding stimuli. SpongeBob already feels a greater reward from moving his nose and eyebrows than the entire time he has spent writing.
I can feel those juices pumping now.
Though SpongeBob believes he can transfer that effect to writing, just sliding his chair to his desk reminds him how inherently unrewarding writing an essay is. But he still won't let himself run off and do what he would normally do. Unable to commit to either, SpongeBob fidgets back and forth between short-term reward and long-term gratification, addicted to a dichotomy of stress and release that gets him nowhere.
What am I doing? I gotta write that paper. Come on, pencil. Make words.
SpongeBob, forlorn that he can't use his pencil any more than a means to an end, wants to feed Gary so that he can feed on the validation that someone relies on him. A gesture to also reassure SpongeBob that he can take care of himself.
What do you mean you're not hungry? Meow. I know I have an essay to write.
Blocked once again, this time by his own pet, SpongeBob forces and overdoes the simple task, expecting a greater magnitude of effort to translate to a proportionally large reward.
I gotta make sure you get your nutrition, so I'm not leaving until you eat every single bite.
The inverse happens and his effort returns with a disproportionately small reward. He can't scale up how he processes stimuli, so to get what he wants, all he can do is recreate his limited understanding of rewarding behavior.
Gee, Gary sure made a mess. I can't work on my essay knowing there's a mess in the kitchen.
And so that one chore turns into a homemaking fuel manic episode. And because no one thing can fulfill what SpongeBob thinks he needs, it doesn't end until effort and reward equal out.
Why, that didn't take too long. It's only 10 o'clock!
A dopamine rush did nothing to change his long-term anxiety, but at least now he's emboldened to start on his essay.
Okay, Mr. Essay, I say, prepare to be written!
SpongeBob conceives that now, with all the chores done, the pencil can finally write the essay for him. But the pencil is just a car key that SpongeBob, instead of leaving in the ignition, keeps turning back and forth, smiling in amazement when one turn revs the engine louder than the turn before it.
Done. Now let's see how it looks so far. The break time!
SpongeBob just emptied a full tank of gas he didn't know he had. To refuel, he's back in his coping cycle of moving around and looking for attention. Through technology, like a phone, SpongeBob would surely be distracted, but then he could find the validation he needed from anywhere.
What's that? Hello?
Hey, Patrick, what you up to?
Sleeping.
SpongeBob tries to siphon energy off of a gas guzzler. In the middle of refueling, though, Patrick will not waste his own energy source for SpongeBob's sake.
You and I both know that you're just using me as a distraction so you don't have to write your essay.
That is not true. I called to have an engaging conversation with you.
Well, I'm listening.
SpongeBob hides the intent of the call as both a last-ditch effort to get what he wanted and to suppress the knowledge he did this to himself.
Got an important essay to write? Sheesh, what a chatterbox. Can't he see that I'm busy?
SpongeBob sees his eraser shavings and knows he is to blame for having to see these literal physical manifestations of repeated, failed attempt to write an essay.
Now they're floating around my thinking space.
So he gets rid of them. But as suppressed thoughts go, just as sponges breathe, what you blow away will come back eventually. So SpongeBob suffocates on something that should have shrunk as his ideas grew.
Water!
However, his ideas were fundamentally never his and never existed in the first place. So SpongeBob needs water because he was literally and figuratively choking on nothing.
What do you mean overly dramatic, Gary? All that choking sure made me hungry.
Called out by his own pet, SpongeBob justifies his psychological pain with physical need.
I gotta have my brain food.
But instead of eating, he chooses what to eat.
White or rye bread. Or pumpernickel. Gee, I guess it really depends on the meat inside. And the cheese. A visitor? For me?
In talking to the mailman about his job, SpongeBob feeds on the idea that he can provide for himself while still using others as a crutch. He thus separates being an adult from self-reliance and conflates it with being able to make decisions.
It puts bread on the table.
Rye or pumpernickel?
Oh, brother.
So do you deliver your own mail? Or do you have your own mail person?
SpongeBob uses circular reasoning to project his existential anxiety onto having to deliver his own mail. It's also a rabbit hole that the mailman couldn't care less about.
Don't you have a paper to write?
How did he know I'm supposed to be writing an essay?
It's probably because he looks like a kid who'd have homework. But SpongeBob, retreating back into his house, projects his suspicion into an altered reality. Here, more than himself, more than the other characters, and more than the water around him, society at large, and by extension, the viewers, decide his understanding of reality.
When will he learn?
A powerless participant and omnipotent observer, SpongeBob karate chops the broadcast of his life out of existence. But nothing changes. It just compresses SpongeBob's anxiety into one object at a time.
Put your feet up and relax.
All he does is put a spotlight on his insecurity.
Oh no! Midnight!
This shifts the dream to the nature of time, as if to show SpongeBob what he fundamentally is. A cartoon running against the flow of time, away from the end of his episode. But he can't run from time, so the stakes heighten, and SpongeBob must jump to return to his desk, to a place that destroys his self-esteem, and strips away his innate character. In the process, he loses his Squarepants, this external identity he both knows himself as, and presents to the audience. SpongeBob chases this externalized identity through his subconscious until he locks himself out of his own house, leaving someone else to not just control the pencil, nor his thoughts, but the fire SpongeBob set. He only wanted to earn his driver's license and spend time with his friends, but with no time left, he can do neither. With no possibility of getting either goal, SpongeBob loses control of his ego, one that cannot validate itself, one that can only burn itself up, and one that can only cry out and hope someone listens.
What have I done? Help! Help! My house is on fire!
But no one will listen. In his cartoon world, he's just dreaming. In the real world, someone else animates his every move and scripts his every thought. Be it in boating school, in the greater SpongeBob cinematic universe, in his biology as a sea sponge, He is a two-dimensional character controlled by three-dimensional gods, running around a fire he lit in his mind that requires someone else to put out. He knows that he'll remain even after his house burns down, so he keeps running, around and around, and episode to episode.
SpongeBob, why? Why did you set me on fire, SpongeBob? Why didn't you just write your essay? Stop wasting time!
When he wakes up, the pencil and paper are both stuck to his face. He's been trying to absorb inanimate objects this whole time, so SpongeBob laughs that the essay's difficulty was in his head all along, just as it was caused by who he is. A sea sponge.
Do I dare look at the clock?
But he cannot absorb an empty essay, and the clock reminds him that, with the little time remaining in the episode, he must write it himself.
How am I supposed to know what not to do at a stoplight? Feeding your snail is something not to do at a stoplight. And making a sandwich, and lighting candles, and drinking water, and calling your friends, and karate chopping the TV, and shooting the breeze with the mailman, and falling asleep.
Even with all of his lived experiences, more true to him than anyone else, SpongeBob still runs to school for someone else to validate what he went through. Now that it's a written, external object, he makes his essay into his anchor, but it won't have value unless someone else tells him it has value. The thing is, no one in his cartoon world knows or cares about what he went through, not even Mrs. Puff, SpongeBob's teacher and backseat driver. This assignment would have had no bearing on their lives, and it shouldn't have for SpongeBob either.
But what about my essay?
I decided to cancel the assignment. We're just going to take a field trip to a stoplight instead. See you next week.
With no audience when it came time to take a bow, SpongeBob rips the essay, and therefore himself, in two. Like curtains opening into his unresolved mind, the essay is spotlight on what wasn't there. SpongeBob will get over it by the next episode, and the audience will take it as they will, but at least they have an example for what they should not do at a stoplight.